Our journey as musicians who play the guitar is a storied one. I can recall a massive struggle just learning the change from C to G, right? And then forget about F, right? That was a huge struggle. But as I went along, I learned new chords, learned some scales, learned to play the blues shuffle, got some simple guitar solos under my belt. Each one of these things provided me new capability and new confidence. But where does the study of arpeggios fall into play here? When's a good time to take arpeggios on? Why would we even want to know them? What the heck even is an arpeggio? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Chris. Today you will have your first arpeggio lesson. Now, if you already know arpeggios, you should stick around anyway, because the way I'm going to unpack these, there might be some insight for you there. But if you haven't got on the arpeggio bus yet, this video is for you. I'm going to explain what arpeggios are. Then I'm going to catalog sort of the values. Why would it be important for us to learn them? Why do we want to learn arpeggios? Then we're going to zoom in. I'm going to show you how to get arpeggios directly in the fretboard where they belong. So what is an arpeggio? The word arpeggio means to play on a harp, which is not very helpful. But basically the concept here, the definition of an arpeggio, is a chord played one note at a time. Now there's a lot more going on here, but technically they present a unique challenge. They sort of exist in between the world of scales and chords. With scales, we learn to play sequentially, right? One note at a time, one note after the other. With chords, we usually put a shape down and strum them. Arpeggios are chords played one note at a time, so you can see how they bridge this gap technically. The way this works out is that with arpeggios, often enough, we are playing one note per string, which moves us across the fretboard in a very, very brand new way. If you haven't done any work on arpeggios, you'll quickly see that this technique is very unique. I'm going to break that down in more detail when we zoom in. But let's talk about what value arpeggios bring. There are a lot of benefits to playing arpeggios and learning them and getting really familiar with them on the fretboard, but I'm going to boil it down to three things. Number one is that technical proficiency. When you learn how to play arpeggios, you're building a brand new technique. It's not scales and it's not chords, it's something in between. This challenges your dexterity and your sequencing and improves both of those things. Number two, your playing starts to sound a little more sophisticated because you're using wider intervals. Scales are played sequentially, one note after the other. Chords are built every other note, and again, I'll get into more detail about this, but the result is a more sophisticated sound. You're using wider intervals. And number three, as you start to play arpeggios and really get that technical capability down, what you're also doing is seeing the fretboard at higher fidelity. Usually we see a chord as a thing, a blob of fingers that we put on the neck and we strum and it makes a sound, right? With arpeggios, you are breaking these chords up into their individual notes, and therefore you start to see how chords are constructed. Beyond many, many things, the technical capability of arpeggios brings you fretboard knowledge like nothing else. Okay, let's zoom in, get some arpeggios directly on the fretboard where they belong. Okay, we're going to start out really simply. We're going to use this. This is a C open chord. It's one of the first chords I ever learned on the guitar. We're going to change this into an arpeggio, but before we do, I'm just going to catalog what notes are actually in this chord. This is C, E, G, C, E. So as you can see, there's two C's in it and two E's in it. Some duplicates there. C, E, and G are all the notes we need for a C chord. So we just need these three strings ringing out, right? Now to play this as an arpeggio, we simply play it one note at a time. That's an arpeggio. We've just played our first arpeggio. Boom, done, right? I can shorten these note values to get a different effect, but here it is. The first thing I'm going to do here is take this G note and I'm going to move it onto the D string. In fact, this is the note I use to tune the G string, right? The G on the D string. I'm going to keep these two notes the same, but I'm going to play the G here. Same three notes, right? And now I've got this shape. This shape was one note per string. This has one note on the A string, but two on the D string. Another way to play a C major arpeggio. I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to move the E to the A string. There it is. Keep these two notes the same. Now the two notes are on the A string and there's a single note on the D string. Right? So from this one shape and this one idea, playing one note at a time, I've already got 3 different arpeggios. It looks like I could play this anywhere, right? And in fact, I can. Anywhere I find a C note, here's one on the E string. Just did the same thing on that string and I can play it anywhere, right? Here's another one. We've had to move this because of the B string. B string's tuned down, so we had to move this note up. Right? So that same idea of just these 3 shapes, now I can suddenly play a C major arpeggio anywhere on the neck. This is getting pretty powerful, right? You can see where this is going. Okay, now let's go back to this one here. This is my C, right? I'm going to change this into a minor chord, and the way to do that is just simply flat the third. So it's going to be C, E flat, and G. I just changed the E's to E flat, right? Suddenly I've got a C minor arpeggio. And I can do that anywhere. Right? So suddenly I've got C minor arpeggios. I haven't had to learn anything new. I'm going to go back to this one. And I'm going to add a B note into it. C, E, G, B. There's my B right there. It's a new note on the next string. The B in this scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, is the 7th degree. This is the last note in the scale, that 7th note, before we get back to the C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I add this note to the arpeggio, I now have a C major 7 arpeggio. Right? I haven't had to learn anything new, I just added the 7. If I wanted to play a C dominant 7, it's the same exact thing, but the flat 7. In other words, I just take that B note and move it down a half step. Now I've got a C dominant arpeggio. If I wanted a minor 7, I just change the E to an E flat. There's a minor 7 flat 5 if I just flat the G. Again, I have not had to learn anything new. I've taken this one idea and I've introduced new information. I've moved it around the neck, and suddenly my concept of how to play an arpeggio is totally intact. And I'm also seeing chords in a new way. I don't just see them as blobs now, I can see the notes inside them. And I'm playing more sophisticated sounds. These are the benefits of learning arpeggios, and it's this easy. Just take a chord you already know, use this C chord for example, just do what I just did, and you will start to see the fretboard at a much higher fidelity, and you'll start to get fretboard freedom as well as starting to really wrap your head around how chords are built and start to play more sophisticated, unique sounds. Well, there's my take on an intro to arpeggios. As you can see, it's much more of a methodology than a library of things to use, right? Once you know the technique and the way arpeggios are built, you can just do it to any chord you can find, right? It's not a matter of learning a new shape every time. It's a matter of taking the idea and then plugging in as many new chords as you ever learn. This gives you a lot of fretboard freedom and a lot of capability to self-educate. If you need help with this lesson, I put the tabs on my Patreon page. Head on over there if you want to grab them. And if you'd like to get a little bit deeper with me, see more of what I have to offer, take a look at Patreon. I've got an online guitar academy there. I'm teaching live sessions, doing live Q&A sessions. It's a lot of fun. If you want to get deeper with me, that's the best way to go. And if you do decide to support the channel, I thank you in advance. I hope you found this lesson interesting. I hope you found it helpful. Above all, stay curious, and I'll see you next time.